did want to make one quick announcement that the mapping posters for the Regional Carbon Capture Deployment Initiative are out by the registration desk. So if you want to go by and take a look at those, please do. So I'd like to introduce Akshat, Rathi, who's going to be our moderator for our final panel, and Akshat will introduce all the other panelists in a moment. Akshat is the Science, Energy, and Environment reporter for Quartz. In 2017, I know a lot of you probably read a lot of his 10-part series on the promises of carbon capture. He is widely published in many publications that are very renowned in this space, so I'm pretty sure you've read some of his material. Akshat and his panel will explore the message that we heard about a lot yesterday, that of how to better get out the message of what carbon capture is, what it can be, and why it's a necessary part of our energy future. Folks in this room know it, but the question becomes how do we convey it to others? And we've been talking about that for the last couple of days. So it's a great and very diverse panel who are going to share their opinions with us. So Akshat, please lead us through.
I think by now you all know the drill. I'm going to bring on a stellar panel. The topic, the importance of the topic can be judged by the size of the panel, which is the largest panel we have at the conference. So please welcome Fornstrom from the Deputy Chair of the Wyoming Public Service Commission, Faison, founder and CEO of Prickett Foundation, Bob Manis, CEO of Co2nnect, Prickett, Chief External Affairs Officer with the Nature Conservancy, and Mijo, Vodopic, Senior Program Officer with the Moderator Foundation. So all of us will take a few minutes to just give opening remarks and then open for questions. As the moderator, being asked to go first. I wanted to start with a simple juxtaposition of facts. We heard from a number of speakers a difficult truth about the state of human existence today. On the one hand, we need to cut emissions if we are to avoid catastrophes of climate change. On the other hand, we are still getting about 80% of our primary energy from fossil fuels without carbon capture. And that hasn't changed since the 1970s. The juxtaposition of those facts should make the case for carbon capture straightforward. And yet the technology even though the technology has been used at a commercial scale for 50 years, has been used specifically for climate mitigation for 20 years, we are nowhere close to tapping the potential for this technology to help us fight the good fight. Why is that? Let me give you an example, and to the people in this audience, this may not be a surprising one, but when I share this with those who don't know the oil and gas industry, I hear gasps. Last year, ExxonMobil and its partners began extracting oil from the Hebron Ben Nevis oil field. The total expense, capex plus opex, for the project is about $14 billion. It has created hundreds of jobs, and those jobs will last for 2 decades, which is about the time you need to extract the proven reserves. All this effort, I'm afraid, will produce only 7 days' worth of oil consumption at current levels. That's approximately 700 million barrels. We have amongst us representatives of oil companies, including ExxonMobil, who know how to develop such large projects with a long-term vision. But one reason carbon capture remains poorly understood is because most of these companies aren't doing enough to develop and promote these technologies. A few of the presenters spoke yesterday about how climate change has polarized the environmental community between the keep it in the ground, let's say, idealists, or and this coalition, which Governor Mead rightly put as the pragmatists. But that divide will only deepen if this crowd shies away from engaging with the other side. We all want the same thing, a planet we can hand over to the next generation, just as it was bestowed upon us. As the only journalist on any of the panels, it's my duty to be provocative. It's also the last panel, so I'm going to try and keep you interested. So I'll end my remark with a provocation. Last year I spent 9 months reporting this series. My goal was to understand whether the technology, carbon capture, can live up to its promise, and who are the players that can deliver on the promise in the future. I ended up writing 30,000 words. I wasn't expecting to. Across 10 articles. Sadly, none of those articles featured a fossil company as its lead character. And why is that? It's not just that we're seeing most innovation come from startups like Nektar, who we heard from, or Focus 12, who was in the panel yesterday, or any number of other names we've heard through the conference over the last few days. But also because fossil companies seem not interested in working with media. I cover all forms of energy. The biggest barriers I have to tell these stories have been set up by the fossil industry. There's not just a communication gap. The communication gap doesn't exist in a vacuum. It needs to be met with action, and I hope with this panel we can find ways to address some of that. Thank you. Jay, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I'm a business guy who sold his business almost 6 years ago. And I've been a lifelong Republican and followed energy environment for, say, 20 years. And when I sold my business and knew I wanted to exercise my entrepreneurial thing and social good, I had about 3 big ideas. One of which was energy and the environment, and that I had followed. And my vision was to go to DC and try to create a solution-oriented environment between Republicans, industry, conservationists, et cetera. Create some space where I didn't see any. That was the idea. And I have to tell you what's so exciting about this conference is I see it here. Like, this is the best representation of what I had in mind when I started this 5 years ago. So I just want to give everybody this is what the solution, this is what progress, and I think this is what our country should look like. Not throwing tomatoes from the trenches, but actually coming together, laying out facts, getting stuff done. Fantastic. So anyway, ClearPath works on policy, which is my foundation, works on policy. We work on lobbying, which I call legislative entrepreneurship, and we work on the politics as well. So we are sort of a full service offering led by Mr. Rich Powell there in the back, who's chuckling as usual, and really proud of the work that he especially is doing there. I kind of handle more of the political side, and I've spent a lot of time trying to sell things like 45Q to members of Congress. I've got a lot of reps on that, and you know, I equate it to selling boxes of cereal. So you're going to have to bear with me on this because I'm going to ride this analogy all the way to the end. If you think about members of Congress and everything that's coming across their plate, it's almost like you're going through the grocery, they're going through the grocery store looking at 60,000 different items. It's about what a big grocery store has, I think. That's pretty confusing. All these pressures and fundraising, so you've really got to break through. Your box of cereal has to be named appropriately. What's our name? Is it carbon capture, CCS, or CCUS? We probably need to coalesce on a name, okay? So the branding actually matters. The color of the box matters. Is this purple, or is it red, or is it blue, or what is it? This is a uniquely purple box, which is better. Yeah, price matters. First thing you're going to be asked is the score. How much is this going to cost? Like, let's get straight on that. What are we asking for? What about and the eye height on the aisle? Where are we placing this? We'd like to be on an end cap. What are we doing to get this policy at the front of the line? Because that matters. You know, companies pay a lot to be at the front of the end cap. And then on the back of the box, there are these stories. I don't know if you've seen organic cereals and stuff, and they all have a story about the founder or the family that's milking the cows and stuff. Well, you know what? We can have different stories as consumer products have in different parts of the country that fit what we want to fit, but we do need to have that specific story, right? And I don't know that we have that. So maybe there's another conference we have to get all this straight so I know what kind of box of cereal we're selling, but that would be a hard push for me. Additionally, we need some coupons. And this is a little bit controversial, but frankly, political donations matter a lot, and that's going to get you better placement on the aisle, maybe even the end cap. Now, I was texting on the final hour of final day of 45Q, its inclusion in the tax package, and 45J was already in. That's an extension of the PTC for the nuclear industry. They were already in. Why were they already in? Southern Company. Southern Company is extremely powerful and organized lobby in DC and others, and whatever they cut, and they were in, and it was a lock. We were not in. And at that 11th hour, somehow it got through. And I'm sure a lot of us were on the phone and things were happening, but we got lucky. If I'm honest, I think we got lucky. So we need more coupons, and what we need, frankly, we need more of a political coalition as well, whatever that looks like. That would be a push I would make. So again, if we can keep it simple, think about the analogy of a box of cereal. What are we going to name it? What color is it? What is the cost? Can we get it on the aisle? And what's our coupon? If we can all coalesce around that, tailor it to the correct audience, I think we're going to be a lot more successful. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Jay. I'm Glenn Prickett with the Nature Conservancy. We are brand new members of the Carbon Capture Coalition. Really excited to be here. So I have to say, you all have been exceptionally kind as I've shown up here. People thanking us for being part of it, which we're thrilled to do. And it's very gracious for you to put me on this wrap-up panel, even though we're brand new to the coalition and new to the issue. It was actually, I think, a very clever strategy to make sure that Richard Garrett, my TNC colleague, and I were paying very close attention throughout the conference and learning everything we could, because we're definitely in learning mode. We've worked on climate change for a long time, 25 years or so. Our focus historically has really been on the role that nature can play in removing carbon from the atmosphere and helping communities be more resilient, and that continues to be our major focus. But in the last few years, we've really been building up our capacity here in the United States to work more broadly on clean energy policy. So you might say we're sort of long-time listeners, first-time callers to this coalition. We've, for many years understood the importance of carbon capture technology to solve global climate change. And we agree with all of you here that we're not going to get to the goal of below 2-degree climate change without this technology or this set of technologies. But now we actually have some capacity to help with the effort, so we're really pleased to be part of the coalition. We have underway something we call our 50-state climate initiative. So we've asked all of our state chapters, and if you don't know the Nature Conservancy, we're one global organization, but the heart and soul of the organization really are in our state chapters and our country programs around the world. Richard here is with our Wyoming chapter. So we've asked each of our US state chapters to get engaged on climate and energy policy in a way that makes sense in that state for those constituencies. And that looks different here in Wyoming than it does in California, than it does in Florida. But we're in the game now, and also working in Washington where we can make progress at the federal level. So we're going to learn, we're going to try to be a good member of the coalition and look to us for help at the state level and in Washington on this agenda. I just wanted to share a reflection on sort of what I learned here that I think is important for all of us going forward, and then two maybe asks or suggestions. So I came to this again thinking, okay, carbon capture technology really important as a global climate solution, but there's something bigger going on here that I think we should really acknowledge and use to frame our work going forward. I don't know if it's the story on the box that Jay was mentioning, but we might be able to craft the story from it. So, what I've seen here are leaders in energy states, elected officials, labor leaders, business leaders, very bravely standing up an agenda to address climate change as an economic opportunity for their state. And that's really powerful. And for those of us who've been working on climate change for a long time and have been frustrated with the increasing political divide, it's what we've wanted and needed. So kudos to the organizers of this coalition for putting that in motion, and especially kudos to the brave leaders who are doing that. We heard it from the governors this morning, we heard it from Senator Barrasso the other day, we heard it from business leaders like Vicky yesterday. I was really moved by the labor panel, Chauffé and Roxanne and Alan, and what you offered. And I think for those of us in the environmental movement, if we frame it that way, it makes it much harder for an environmental organization not to meet those leaders halfway. So it's not just a wonky technology or policy agenda, it's really a political agenda in the best sense of the word on how we bring people together to address climate change, particularly in energy states where it's a tough issue politically. So I just wanted to share that. I think there's some lightning in a bottle here that we should really work with. And we're going to have to do the wonky work on the technology, policy, and finance, but framing it in that broader message I think will be important. Two quick suggestions or asks. I wanted to reinforce what Aaron said yesterday about engaging the business community more broadly on carbon removal. I spend most of my time at the Nature Conservancy working with business. There's a tremendous opportunity in general with business leaders right now. You all know this, those of you who are business leaders in the room. But there is growing interest in this paradigm shift of how can companies help to drive carbon removal, climate solutions in their value chains. We're working with Walmart on their Project Gigaton, working with companies like Shell and BP on how they sell more climate-friendly fuel to their commercial customers, working with Cargill on how they help drive climate solutions in agriculture. So I think bringing more business leaders into this coalition, even from outside the relevant energy sectors, could be an important opportunity. We might be able to make some immediate progress in those value chain strategies, and it'll help build support for the policy and political changes we need to make. And then the last thing I'd ask is that we be mindful of some adjacent spaces, and the one I have in mind particularly is the work we do on what we call natural climate solutions. We heard a bit about it yesterday in terms of agriculture. Working with farmers in the American Midwest, working with ranchers in the Brazilian Cerrado, there are opportunities very similar to what we're talking about here to take carbon from the atmosphere in ways that create economic opportunity for those rural communities. So I'm not saying you have to dilute the policy agenda of what this coalition is doing, but recognizing that there are like-minded efforts and fellow travelers out there working on the same kind of political strategy, I think will be important, and we might be stronger together than separately. So just throw that out there as food for thought. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Fornstrom. I'm the Deputy Chair of the Wyoming Public Service Commission. I'm excited to be on this panel. I want to thank the Great Plains team for such an excellent job putting this conference together. And I have to thank the two Matts from Wyoming before I get into my remarks. Governor Matt Mead gave me an opportunity of a lifetime when he appointed me to the commission in 2013, so thank you, Governor. And Matt Fry, who does great work in this space for the governor's office, and has done a lot to get this conference going. I'll talk in a minute about my role as a utility regulator in CCUS and where I see that role going, but I want to confess that my initial interest in CCUS was completely selfish. I'm a native fifth-generation Wyomingite. My husband and I are involved in a third-generation farming operation in southeast Wyoming. It's difficult to overstate what the impact of coal is on the state of Wyoming. You heard some statistics yesterday, but I want to remind you of a couple. We produce 40% of the coal mined in the country. That's more than the next 6 states combined. And it's also important to note that in 2016, we shipped coal to 32 other states for coal generation. We got a glimpse in 2016 about what a negative impact can happen when the coal industry suffers. And one day in March 2016, we referred to it as Black Thursday. We lost almost 500 mining jobs in one day. All of our coal companies, most of our coal companies went through bankruptcies that year. It affected everything in our state, our budget, our out-migration, our unemployment, and the way that we have historically funded our school construction. That glimpse got me very focused on the future of the coal industry, and I believe that is completely tied to CCUS. I don't know what our state looks like for the next generation of my family if we don't have a coal industry. As a commissioner, I understand that I am not a policymaker, I'm an economic regulator. But I've been thinking about Elisa Ferguson's charge to us yesterday to figure out what each of us can do in our industries to affect change. And I have a couple thoughts on that. One, for my industry, is to spread the word. Our national association, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, is called NARUC. We meet 3 times a year as a national conference and once a year as a regional conference. We spend a lot of time at NARUC talking about the grid of the future. Coal generally, and CCUS specifically, are not part of that conversation to date, and I think that needs to change. I am co-vice chair of the subcommittee on coal management and carbon management for NARUC, and I'm hosting a group of regulators at ITC in September to show them what's going on in Wyoming in terms of innovation. I'm hoping that the chairman of the Illinois Commission, who is here today, Brian Sheehan, will join us. I've been working on it pretty hard privately, and now I'm doing it publicly, so hopefully he'll join us there, and I think he can really help at the NARUC level to push this conversation to a general session topic. Also, as a related topic, as commissioners, we're pretty bombarded with news compilation services every day, Utility Dive, Morning Consult, Energy Central. And this is not a scientific analysis, but my guess is about 97% of those articles about coal are negative. So I want to reiterate Steve Oldham's point of yesterday that please talk about your projects, please talk to the press, please promote yourselves. We've got to start getting the message out there to what regulators are reading every day. Second, I think it's important that we understand that the traditional rate-making model is not going to be good about incenting CCUS development for utilities that are regulated. We talked yesterday about what the acceptable risk is to investors. Let me assure you that utilities and utility regulators are even farther down on that spectrum than the ones that we talked about yesterday. It's just not what we do. So we need to educate utilities about CCUS opportunities. We need to encourage them to designate a team within their companies to understand it, to learn about it, to understand what the opportunities are in their area and possibly for their utility. It seems to me that to be successful, at least at first, in bringing CO2 regulated entities into this conversation, they're going to have to work with third parties. And instead of them thinking about this traditionally and getting an asset into rate base so that they can get a return on it, we need to make sure they understand that there is a revenue opportunity which will benefit not just the utility, but obviously ratepayers. In closing, I have 38 seconds left. I just want to tell you all how refreshing it has been for me to be in a room like this for the last 2 days, to be able to talk positively about the future of the carbon economy. I want to thank you all for coming to Wyoming. I hope you'll come back often. I now go back to the regulatory world armed with a lot more information, a lot more ideas about what we can do in this space. And I assure you I'll be talking to as many of my colleagues around the country as I can about it. So thank you so much again for the opportunity to be on this panel, and I'm looking forward to the question and answer session.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Bob Manus. I am the founder and currently the CEO of Co2nnect. We are a small independent oil and gas producer in Michigan. So the first thing I need to do is tell everybody there is oil and gas production in the state of Michigan. It's been going on for nearly 100 years, so it's all good. So Co2nnect was formed 18 years ago for the specific purpose of conducting CO2 enhanced oil recovery operations. We capture CO2 from a gas processing plant. We've got compression, we've got pipeline infrastructure, and we've got 10 projects that are in various stages of enhanced oil recovery. We've been a site host for the last 12 years for the Midwest Regional Partnership. Mr. Winberg addressed the partnership work that's been done, and our company's proudly been a part of that for the last 12 years, doing a lot of work. We currently inject nearly 2,000 tons a day of CO2. And lastly, we with admiration stand in the shadow of Oxy. We usually show up at these conferences being the smallest juxtaposed against the largest EOR operator in the country, but really like the leadership that you're bringing to that. Thank you. So Our company, I've known Brad for over 10 years. We're involved in founding Neori with Brad, and been following through in 45Q and working with the coalition. We made order 2 weeks ago to expand our facilities, bought more compression to expand our capture capacity, and 45Q was very much an integral part of that decision-making process. So someone had asked earlier if 45Q makes a difference, and it did, and it does, and it will continue to do so. I don't feel like I'm the guy qualified to talk about expanding the definition of clean energy, but I will say some of the things that struck me is that we do have a messaging challenge, a big messaging challenge. And Jeff, some of the comments that you had made yesterday about shifting from a renewable portfolio standard to a clean energy standard, I think would be a significant move that we could do that would help out. I think we need to get more projects going. The energy project, getting that update, that was exciting. That was a big deal to get that into the end zone. But I think we need to focus on quantity now, not just quality. We got to have some big ones to be working on, but this right now is about getting more projects done, and we take smaller bites, get them done quicker, and we can roll this technology out and be proving that it works. So I guess, and to me, those projects would also include natural gas. We didn't hear much talk about natural gas capture, and I know that's a big challenge and an expensive one. But to go after carbon capture and focus just on coal, which is vitally critical, we can't ignore the political reality of the pressure that coal's under, and the shorter the life is getting to amortize the cost of capture over. So we need to look to natural gas and other sources. So I'll just share a couple of little bit of story. I'm going home to northern Michigan, to a city that this weekend is having a Michigan's Clean Energy Summit for 3 days in our town. And I looked at the agenda. There's some speakers coming in from around the country. Everything is wind and solar. The city where I am, they're patting themselves in the back because they just made the decision to go 100% renewables. And they're telling everybody that, and I'm not anti-wind and solar. But they're proud of the fact they're going 100% renewable, and I know they've got coal contracts that are going to last for 10 or 20 years. So there's some frustration with the maybe a little deception going on. And then it wasn't but a month ago, I was in the office of the Vice President of Generation of a power generator in the state that has a simple cycle, peaker unit not far from some EUR opportunities. Started talking to them about going combined cycle, and hey, when you do this, let's talk about capture and just exploring some possibilities. And the reaction that I got was, no, I said, look, I'm willing to do some design work, and I just need some information, and this, and I said, no, we're not, we can't do that. What do you mean you can't do that? If people knew that we even considered it and researched it, we'd get badgered with all kinds of pressure that we would then have to do it. Not the response I was expecting, but now I got to go back to the drawing board, and now I got to come out and figure out how to further explain the commodity value. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to come back with a value add to your situation here. So that gets back to the messaging challenge. So as I've been thinking through this, I don't know of any direct opposition to CCUS for the sake of CCUS. I don't think there's any opposition. There may be groups in opposition to it, but I think it's to further a different agenda, whether it's keep it in the ground or other things, but I don't think there's any direct opposition. We're all leaving here with more encouragement, more specific knowledge. We all have spheres of influence when we get home. Pick two. In the next week, go tell somebody a story about carbon capture, utilization, and storage, unashamedly, courageously, like this is and needs to be part of the future. And then the specific ask I would have for the Nature Conservancy and other environmental groups is, can you validate carbon capture on fossil fuels? Because that would really help to advance the conversation to get some validation in some of those circles. So that then we dare talk to reporters.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mijo Vodopic. I'm with the MacArthur Foundation, and we are based in Chicago. For those of you who don't know, we're a $7 billion foundation, and I work in what we call our Climate Solutions program, and I work here in the U.S., India, and in China. And I think when I reflect back on these few days, or these 2 days, there's one word that comes to me about carbon capture, and that's bullish. I know all of you have had a very challenging fight for 45Q. As a matter of fact, we have several of our grantees who have worked very hard and had supported that. And for us, what I see emerge is a new body politic here. And you exercise that body to be successful in securing 45Q. And now you have an opportunity, because that's not just the last hurdle you need to cross. We need to implement it now. I was the gentleman who actually asked Bob, I said, how much are you going to be using 45Q? Because it's important. If that sits there and it's not used, then we're going to have a challenge in terms of not just messaging, but also questioning, again, the technology. Why else am I bullish? I saw over these last few days not only impressive examples about enhanced oil recovery, which we all know that's the leading use and example, but we saw other examples that can be brought together. And when you have a new technology like this, having multiple uses only benefits everyone else who's applying that technology. Because again, to the messaging point, and again, where we work on is on this definition of clean energy. Most of our work is about what we like to call just communicating, helping people understand that to address this challenge of climate change, we need a solution set. There is no silver bullet. This one, carbon capture, is an exceptionally valuable part of that set. And for too long, it hasn't been looked at seriously. It has not been welcomed into the family of other kind of solutions that are all gearing towards trying to lower the carbon intensity of our economy. And so what what I'm walking away with is being very positive about not only seeing the movement within the industry, the movement within state government to be accepting of this and challenging companies and others to move forward. But then the last piece is, we do work internationally. It's amazing to see the technology development here in the U.S. and the potential for that export outside of the U.S. Particularly with the new center here in Wyoming, I think there's a challenge here, or the opportunity to really spread more American ingenuity about this very particular technology. So a few things just about the foundation. I'll just say, I emphasize, we're trying to ourselves expand that definition. It isn't just wind and solar and hydro. It's also biomass. It's also energy efficiency, carbon capture. And frankly, there may be others that we're not even touching on. I should also mention, we in Illinois, we have been supportive of keeping our nuclear fleet up. We know these are all vital elements of a broader conversation. And we're encouraged, and I'm encouraged by what I saw these last day and a half, and I think from MacArthur, we have been supporting this as an idea through groups, through Great Plains Institute and others who are here in the room. And we're going to continue that because we think the momentum is there, and it's exciting to see that. Thank you.
We have 20 minutes, and so before I open the floor for questions, I wanted to ask the audience a question. How many of you, and the panels included, have worked with a journalist and that's ended up becoming a story? Raise your hands. How many of you have worked with a journalist and that's led to a story? This is a much higher number than the previous group I used to address, which was scientists. And that's good news. The challenge you guys have is not as difficult. If you think the fossil industry is conservative, scientists are a lot more conservative when it comes to media. Please ask questions.
Hi, Carl Hausker with the World Resources Institute. A question that maybe any of the panelists could respond to. We of course have many companies committing to buy 100% renewables. We have increasing number of cities committing to doing that, and there's going to be a new effort ramped up to encourage more and more cities to do that. At the same time, some of the more sophisticated companies who are saying, we want to help solve the climate problem, like Google, have said we are going to go beyond renewables. We're going to purchase renewables combined with storage, with demand response, or even, if you read to the end of their white paper, they might buy nuclear or CCS. Pretty amazing evolution there. The question is, what do you perceive among companies or cities you deal with that there is potential to move them beyond renewables to where they could buy clean energy, broadly defined, or somehow get off of just the 100% renewables mantra?
I'll take that one, Carl. It's great question, really important question. And not having talked to any of them about it, I'll hazard a guess. I would say, in principle, probably yes. But in the same way, just to be really honest about it, that it's a challenge for a big environmental organization to engage on the issue. It's a challenge for a big brand to engage on CCS or nuclear. So that goes back to my earlier recommendation. I think the way to do that is to start inviting a few into this coalition. Sort of come on in, the water's fine, there's safety in numbers, you don't have to be isolated out there, making a brave commitment that's going to cause you trouble. But, begin to socialize it with them by bringing them into the coalition. And I think the important thing, and again, Aaron touched on this yesterday, help them see opportunities for driving solutions beyond their own electricity purchases, right? So, they have deep supply chains globally. There are probably huge opportunities in those supply chains where people are using fossil fuel energy today and will keep using it for the foreseeable future, where they could build on their renewable energy commitment by driving more climate solutions. So that probably is the frame, rather than kind of an either-or choice between renewables or fossil.
I would say the frustration that I would have with organizations taking that tact, or cities or municipalities, when it comes down to leadership, is it truly leadership when 100% attainment is not reality? Okay, so is it really leadership? And when people are holding themselves out there, and as the global economy right now, there is not a path forward, and there won't be one in the foreseeable future, to get the world to 100% renewable. So there's where I've got some frustration from a leadership standpoint, and I wish the narrative would shift slightly.
Hi, I'm Ryan McCarthy from the California Air Resources Board. First of all, I want to say thank you to Brad and the host for inviting us. Indeed, this is a good connection, and I and California are happy to be here. I wanted to provide two observations and a question. One is I'm struck by how often we've heard the term zero emissions and negative emissions here today, and I hang out at a lot of conferences with more traditional environmental focuses, and you hear 80% reductions, and you don't hear 100% or negative emissions nearly as much. So I do think this is maybe the beginning of making those connections, but I do think there is the opportunity here to really bring folks together and figure out what that good message is. In California, we're talking about things like 100% renewable energy, and there's recognition, I think, if we ever were to implement a bill or set that as a goal, that it would likely be 100% clean energy. And that's really where you're going after you get to the current 50 or 60% renewables that we expect to get to in the coming years. But I did want to offer one additional point and ask for your reaction to that. Recognizing that as we talk about CCS and getting to zero from fossil fuels, that's really only half the problem, especially for natural gas, if you're not also addressing methane. And methane has been touched on a couple times here. I know a lot of the organizations represented here also have some leading activities on methane, but just wanted to suggest that part of the agenda here, and ask for your actions to this, I guess, but also be addressing methane, and if that should be part of the CCS and getting to zero from fossil, platform and message.
I'll start with that because MacArthur, we also do support and work with organizations that are trying to look at the methane issue and understand, that as as a gas, what are its uses, and understand when it's out in the atmosphere, how can we be better about managing that. And I want to liken it similar to, I think, where we were with the concept of carbon dioxide. Can we see methane and carbon dioxide and other, we saw the net power example, can these things be considered now, as we heard, feedstock? They are elements of something else in another value chain, not something that's waste or a pollutant. And I think that shift in narrative will go a long way in terms of, I think, socializing CCS as well as other technologies. But back on the methane, I think bringing in natural gas companies into this coalition would probably be a good idea, as my sense is that technology can be applied there, and that can only broaden, I think, the weight behind CCS and how that technology can further grow.
Hello. Thank you all for being here. I agree we need to expand the definition. My question to you is around the need for more changes. In order to get this stuff off the ground, we just need a bigger vote. We need more people who are first at many levels, whether they're celebrity superstars or former government officials or leaders in the environmental movement. We don't have enough people involved in this. And there's also a human capital problem behind it in terms of implementing projects and getting new curriculum and all that stuff. Could you speak a little minute about expanding this definition, thinking about how your work can lead to creation of more champions?
I'll take a quick crack at that. I'm going back to my cereal again. I think we got to package it up, and you've got to gain people's interest. I think there is a big opportunity in the environmental community to. I think we need to get the environmental community to try to. I'm worried about environmental community writ large stopping some efforts, interstate pipelines, things like that. And I did want to say one thing about the packaging is it's not just for politicians. I think it's marketing as well, right? And we've just got to market this better. And as far as the environmental groups, if we loosen that, like that should be some leadership we should easily get. I mean, what are the target audiences and how are we addressing these? Let's just say it's environmental leaders. And I know that at the 11th hour of 45Q, one of the largest environmental organizations backed out because they were worried about how enhancing more oil was going to negate the sequestered carbon benefit. And I said, look, that's the wrong way to look at it. China has got $600 billion in coal plants they're not going to shut down, and if you care about carbon emissions, you're going to have to deal with that. And they're like, oh, we never thought about that, right? So if we had packaged it right, delivered it to them, they had been on board, right? We would have had more leadership in a community that should absolutely be with us on the merits of the case, right? So anyway, I think a lot of this is in the packaging and messaging. And I also think it's in the storytelling, and I look, Bill Brown's Net Power is our favorite story. It actually, they hit the button, it ended up turning on, it's actually working, and you could say go visit, and it's there, and it's physical, and that's just another thing, and I think that draws people in, they go, oh, it's real, right? It maps a big global narrative and trend. Okay, maybe I'm missing something on this, right? And that, it's just getting people out of the batter's box, I guess, is my push.
I've been requested that we should finish 5 to 11 because I know a number of you have shuttles to catch. So I'm going to try and ask people to keep questions short, answers short, and please get 2 or 3 done in the next 5 minutes.
Could I follow up on that last question just really quickly? I'm sorry. As I spoke in my prepared remarks about the involvement in neighborhood, we're all involved in organizations like that, and so I think it's incumbent upon all of us to participate in agenda development, be willing to go speak, do those things. As a commissioner, you get a lot of opportunities to speak around the country, and I've made a personal commitment to do more of that than I have done historically, and to go to places that I probably wouldn't normally go. And one thing that I'm also asking when I make that commitment to go speak at those conferences on this issue is that I get at least 45 minutes. It's impossible for me to go into a group of people that are cold on this subject and try to explain it in 5 or 10 minutes. And so I've been a little demanding, which is not typical for me probably, but I think that's what it's going to take, is being in different venues and taking the time to talk about it.
Thank you. Shannon Angelski with the Carbon Utilization Research Council, and I just wanted to pick up, Jay, where you left off on sort of the messaging here. I think a lot of people, people that understand CCUS, it's associated with the use of fossil fuels, and so if we're talking about clean energy, I think it can be difficult in some circles to talk about CCUS being part of a clean energy definition, particularly when we're talking about renewables, because fossil fuels versus renewables, it's hard to, that distinction is not necessarily a clean resource. So what I'm looking to find out from you all is clean the right word that we should be using? Or should we be talking about it as like low carbon? I mean, clearly that's what this is doing, is it's a low carbon technology, and we all know that we need this in order to get to that low carbon future. But what is it that's going to resonate and gain, the kind of acceptance that I think that we're looking for from the broad groups that you all have reach with? Because I think we need to have some sort of clear and consistent way of talking about it in order to get that broader acceptance.
I'll offer our thoughts. I mean, I'm not a marketing expert, so I shouldn't say what the right language is. At TNC, as we're working across all 50 states and around the world on this agenda, clean energy has been working for us because it's a broad enough term that the subtleties can vary depending on where you are. It just sort of works as a compelling overall term. Low carbon or zero carbon, more precise, but more wonky and maybe a little more alienating in some circumstances.
Hey, Jason Ray, Bipartisan Policy Center. As we are closing, offer maybe a little bit of a challenge. It's my view that the technology is really hard because I don't understand any of it, but that the cultural challenges to moving the climate agenda forward are possibly even harder. What is miraculous about this effort is that we're actually expanding beyond our tribes in ways that are a little bit uncomfortable. Chatham House rules are neat because they allow us to kind of build a kind of conversation early. My first girlfriend said she'd date me only in private, not a very satisfying experience for a 4th grader. So I think the challenge now, though, is to strive for discomfort and be really transactional about it, right? There is a fundamental mistrust that is what has empowered the folks versus we can do it all with solar. And everyone justifies what they know is not true by pointing to the other person's fallacy. And so I think we have the strategy. I just think we need now to be really transactional and find somebody and try to build, it's like confidence building. Our organization could say, we actually think non-carbon is better. If your organization would say, we think climate change is a big problem. And just try to plant some of these little kind of acorns, because democracy is a momentum game. And I think we've been in a really vicious cycle for about a decade. I actually think this is the brightest moment for a virtuous cycle. But it's easy to talk to each other. And I think most of us know that when we go back to whatever our own communities are, they really don't agree with what we're saying here. And so I think, and I've heard, frankly, a lot of people say things here that I don't hear them saying in public either. So that would be my challenge. And Jay, I think we should go with the Count Chocula coalition. I think we're choosing.
All about it. One thing I think we need to do collectively, and especially those of us in the environmental community, is really acknowledge and highlight the leadership that's coming out now from governors, business executives. So what Senator Barraza said the other day, what Governors Mead and Bullock said this morning, what Vicki said yesterday, that's huge, right? That you have energy leaders stepping out and saying climate change is a problem, we need to deal with it, and we can deal with it in a way that creates economic opportunity. And we have to make sure that the environmental movement is aware of that and doesn't try to dismiss it. Because yes, we have to reach out to each other, but what I'm seeing is that energy leaders are taking the first step, actually, doing that.
We have one last question and 1 minute to go. Bill's been waiting to ask that.
Sure, thank you guys. Appreciate all of your support and everyone in this room's support. We really can't do this without you. And I want to say, Jay, I love your metaphor. I love your metaphor. The extension to your metaphor is this. The problem that we had is our box of cereal is not in the same store as Gwynn and Sullivan. And this is something where ClearPath and the Nature Conservancy and the MacArthur Foundation can really help in the leadership. Let us get our box of cereal in the same store as the other people who have the same mission. But thank you guys very much.